Hey everyone, this is Nick with Tenacity.ai with my co-host Jason, and you're listening to the Cloud Cost Optimization Podcast. Today we're going to follow up on the last two topics where we talked about starting off the budget. You're right, you're making sure you have the right cadence or the right rhythm around thinking about your spending. It can be more global than just cloud spending, but we're going to focus on spending and optimization in the cloud. And today we want to talk about the sort of financial reporting you want to do at an operational level. How do you want to think about your environment, and what sorts of things do you want to know, whether that's on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis, that will support you in managing to budget and having a successful year from a cloud spending perspective. So, Jason, let's just start right off the bat. What are the sorts of things, operationally, when you're in it and you're in the grind? What are the sorts of things that you need to know ongoing that are going to help you better manage your cloud spending?
Yeah, from an ongoing operation perspective, obviously forecasting and trending, right? Understanding where you are today, where you're going to be, and then obviously, how that impacts your potential budget, positive or negative, and not just at the macro level, but also at the micro level. You need to be able to track these things in the context of your business, whether that's business unit, customer, product line, whatever the case may be, right? Because it's one thing to know that your spend is going to exceed your budget or what you thought it was going to be, but it's another thing to know why. So it's like, you need to be at least armed with the data at hand to be able to lead you down the path of where that potentially is, because it could be a multitude of different things. Keeping track, these kind of go hand in hand together, but keeping track of where you might have anomalous spend activity. This stuff happens all the time, right? Developer may push a piece of code. That piece of code then starts to, that piece of code, maybe it's running in a function, Lambda function or Azure function or something like that, and starts running 24 hours a day. I don't know, right? It could be something that's actually happened, but you can have a $10,000 bill pretty quickly with Lambda if you run it 24 hours and it's actually doing things. So, and then also, just to from an ongoing operational perspective, being able to not only do those things that you need to do from an ongoing perspective to make sure that you're staying within budget, you also need to be able to report it back. So having the data necessary to be able to go back to the business and say, this is exactly why it happened, this is what we're going to do to fix it, or this is why it happened and it's because of XYZ, which we didn't expect to happen, but it did. We blew our numbers out this month, so this application went up. So those are a few things you can do.
So let's break those down. So I think let's start with forecast, which is possibly one of the most important financial metrics, especially from an operational perspective, is understanding variance to budget expectation, or understanding kind of variance to even your forecast expectation. Sometimes your forecast expectation can be different than your budget. That there are reasons why that would happen. But my experience operationally, and probably your experience as well, 99% of the time when you look at your forecast, it's what's expected. So it's rare that it's out of alignment. I would say, with the exception of cloud spending, sometimes it's actually more often out of alignment.
If your expenses are tracking exactly to budget, that most likely means you're managing your expenses to your budget, and not, you know what I mean? Like, it's there's very few. You set a budget at the beginning of the year, and then 10 months later, it's usually not very accurate, right? I mean, that's just what happens.
Often. So let's talk about forecast. It's important to monitor the forecast and understand it. What are the sorts of things, when you do see a variance that's outside of tolerance, and we can, tolerance being maybe I accept a 3% or a 5% variance in my budget, I'm fine with that. But when it's outside of tolerance, what, as an engineer, as someone who's a manager, maybe responsible for a cloud environment, what are the sorts of things I need to start thinking about as I see a wide variance? Whether positive or negative, we could address both.
Well, why? There's obviously outside factors, right? So if you're thinking about, if I'm looking at our budget, let's say we set our budget for whatever this is at $10,000, and then I see 10 days through the month that we're tracking to $11,000 or $12,000, right? Which is a significant difference in that particular budget. I'm going to want to understand why, right? I mean, and just looking at it at a macro level really doesn't give that to you. So what I'm going to want to know is not only like where that is, but what is causing these collection of things or whatever they may be to increase in usage and spend beyond what I expected. And you really have to have your infrastructure in the context of your business to be able to do that, because if I have a bunch of untagged resources, I'm not going to be able to understand what those things are potentially. But yeah, you're going to want to know exactly where, and then from there, where in my environment is this happening that's causing my forecast to be above or whatever it is, and then that information will lead you down the path of figuring out why.
Yeah, I think so. You hit right on it. It's where, it's what, and then it's why. And when you get into that why, there's a handful of questions I think about asking. Usually the first one is what changed, right? Like what's new, or what was just recently deployed, or what changed in the environment. Just because it's usually the culprit. So that's the first place I'd look. I'd also try to understand. Is there something in the business that has changed? Did we, is it we just got a recent injection of data from maybe a customer, a recent sign up, whatever. Those are cases that I've seen in the past where there's some activity that's unusual. It is anomalous. It's expected. We didn't understand its impact. It might be a one-time event, et cetera. So you want to look at those. But it might also be that there's truly something has changed. The most common case in cloud spending is something truly has changed. Like we've changed the deployment method, we've changed a set of services we use, we've changed maybe an amount of data that we store, keep on
storage
hand,
policy, lifecycle policy.
Storage policies,
right?
Yep.
Yeah, it could
all
be
that stuff.
Or we sold more than we expected. Right, could be something not even in the technologist's hands. Right, it could just be, hey man, we sold 20% more units, which means the utilization, or maybe it means the additional infrastructure deployed now is due to that. Right.
I mean, I've seen a number of times where a big POC we didn't even recognize the revenue, so we don't actually see the growth, but we just did a massive POC, and our costs are going up by 10% or something because it's a massive new prospect. Those are acceptable events that we're going to have to report on, but it's far better to speak up the corporate ladder and know that it was related to that than it is to get hammered down upon, why are costs out of control. Far better.
Yeah. Far better.
So let's take sort of the next piece there, which is, savings opportunities. Once I've optimized my environment, and I've gone through and I've eliminated waste, and I've eliminated all the abandoned infrastructure that I could find, in signed up for commitment-based discounts. I think, and we have this conversation quite a bit. Why is this still important? Why is this a metric that I should be reporting on?
Man, I don't know how many times I've heard, well, we did this project, this optimization project. We went through, we cut out all this stuff that we weren't using. We, purchased some reserved instances or savings plans, whatever the case may be. And then you're talking to that customer 6-9 months later. It's like, yeah, our spend's back to our original amount, right? And it's because a lot of the customers we talk to, this is an ad hoc sort of thing for us. They explain it in this way. We do a project 1 to 3 times a year to go through and do this, right? You're wasting a lot of money if you're only looking at this 3 times a year. And so the ongoing effort, I used to always say this when it came to documentation, and I feel like there's so many different areas within IT that you could use this analogy. But with documentation, I used to always say, the easy part is creating the documentation. The hard part is maintaining it, not letting it get stale. No different in this particular situation. The easy part is going through one time, going through and saying, oh, that's not attached, delete, 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 or subscribe to this. The hard part is all of that's going to happen again because it got that way. And so the hard part is creating processes, documenting them, and then making sure that the team, finance and engineering teams, have the necessary data to ensure that they're following those processes on a recurring basis so that you don't end up going back to a bunch of wasted spend, which is what the providers want from you. They want wasted spend. They love it.
Right. I think the important thing to think about there, well, there's many important things to think about, but one of them is it may be easy to go through and do it once, but that constant need to go do discovery once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year is really expensive. And it's not actually all that thorough in environments at scale. And so there are advantages, and I think it's pretty obvious, advantages in being able to report to yourself, whether you're using a platform like Tenacity or whether you're using some sort of tool, or if you have some internal processes that do this as well. But to actually be seeing that on a regular basis, maybe it's a monthly basis, I don't know, but to actually be reviewing that from an operational perspective, helps to understand kind of velocity of the technical debt you're accumulating, and B, helps you justify the need for better tooling to not have to go spend a ton of labor on that, especially in the current economy where, we're seeing job cuts and people having to take on more responsibility, and it's just not it's a stress sandwich is what it is that's going on inside the economy right now. So it's, sometimes getting that justification is hard, but being able to actually show where, there's a strong return because you're going to be able to discover this stuff on a really regular basis and take care of it. That can actually be a benefit to the operational team having to take care of this. Mm-hmm. So I think the third part that you mentioned or hit on was sort of the no surprises piece. Like how do I see anomalies when they're happening? How do I stop issues or adjustments in my spending that maybe are unexpected? So I think touching on what do you do? What composes an anomaly? What do you do when you see one, or what do you do when you see one maybe in the past? Like you're looking on a report and an anomaly happened a week ago. What are the sorts of activities that a team should be undertaking at that point? Why is that important?
Well, I'll start with the historical one, and we'll talk about the active ones. Historical ones, it's you're going to need to understand if I have a new normal. Right, because with anomalies, right, there's some sort of algorithm, AI, machine learning, that's looking for patterns in data, and when it sees something that's outside of whatever the tolerance is, it's going to alert you to it. And so if you have one that's historical, let's say it lasted for X number of days, it might have stayed at that new normal rate, and so it will no longer show up as an anomaly, but you have a new normal of spend for whatever that particular widget was. And so you're going to want to understand if that's to be expected. Did I turn on new services? Did I do this? Did I do that? It might be expected, right? If I'm spending $10,000 a month on EC2 and I spin up a new EC2 instance for something that costs $3,000 a month, that's an anomaly, but I might have needed that particular server. So historically, you're going to want to understand if you have a new normal, or was that just a blip in the radar? And depending on how big the blip was, if you missed it, you may want to go investigate why that happened so that it doesn't creep up again. And from an immediate or actionary perspective, if I get an alert today, if I get an anomaly alert today, I should be able to go in, if it's something that shouldn't be there, and rectify that before it truly affects my bill in the month, or at least fix it. And then if that anomalous spend is maybe pretty high, I might have to move some things around to make sure that I hit my budget going forward. So catching anomalous spend activities, which happen all the time, especially when you're talking about usage-based billing. Most brilliant concept, right? Usage-based billing in the IT space. Those are some of the most important things to keep track of from an ongoing operational perspective is anomalies in your spend and usage.
I think another piece of the historical that's really important and contextual is that as you go through modernization and you begin to leverage serverless architecture, the nature of that is not smooth spending. And so you're going to be looking at, am I seeing a pace, cadence, of velocity of anomalous activity? Maybe let's use an example in AWS. I redeploy a Lambda function, and suddenly I start seeing a cost anomaly that happens, every day at 6 a.m. Well, what has happened? What did I change that caused my costs at 6 a.m. to now be maybe 10 times higher, right? And it's the nature of something that doesn't run consistently that you might just see a periodic spike that's indicative of something went wrong, or I made something too costly when I made a change to the application.
Actually, static costs in a serverless environment would be an anomaly, right? They should not be static. So, yeah, I completely agree with that.
Cool. All right. Well, I think this last piece that we just touched on here, kind of the surprise piece, the what do you do about it? I think that's a topic in and of itself, and so we'll cover off on that in a future episode. But I think that wraps actually today. Sort of the reporting that you want to think about from an operational perspective. What sort of financial reporting you want to react to very early on and very quickly, not to be confused with the financial reporting your finance department's going to want. This is really how do I take action upon my environment. So I think that wraps it for the show. Go out and visit tenacity.ai. Sign up for a demo. Sign up to talk to one of us about how we can help you with your cloud optimization needs. And would love to have you as a guest on the show. So thank you to all of our listeners for tuning into the Cloud Cost Optimization Podcast. Thanks.